There is a body in the grass. It has been there since morning. The lion came first. Lions always come first. They take the soft parts. Then the hyenas. They crush what the lion left. Their jaws break bone. Then the jackals. Then the vultures. Then the flies. And now, finally, you. You are last. You are always last. Everyone ate before you. Everything with teeth. Everything with claws. Look at what is left. Bone. Bone. A skull. Nothing. There is no meat. There has not been meat for hours. The lion took the meat. The hyenas took the scraps. The birds took the rest. So why are you here? Because you did not come for the meat. You came for what is still inside. Watch. You pick up a rock. You put the bone on another rock. You raise your arm. And you hit it. Again. Again. The bone opens. And inside. Marrow. Nobody else got this. Not the lion. Not the hyena. Nothing on this entire savanna. They all have teeth. Teeth cannot do this. You have a rock. And that is the whole story. That is the entire reason you exist. Everything out here has a weapon built into its face. Teeth that came with the animal. Fixed. Finished. Whatever it can bite through, that is what it can bite through forever. You did not come with a weapon. You picked one up off the ground. And if it is not heavy enough, you put it down. And you go get a bigger one. No animal on this savanna can do that. Not one. They are stuck with the face they were born with. You are not. Now the skull. You take that too. You carry it home. Not for the skull. For what is in it. Brain. The lion cannot open a skull. The hyena cannot open a skull. The strongest jaws in Africa cannot open a skull. You did it with a rock. So here is what you are. You are not the strongest. You are not the fastest. You do not have claws. You have no fangs. You come last. Every single time. And you are the only one on this continent who gets the good part. Let me show you why that matters more than everything else in this story. For a long time, the story we told about early humans was a hunting story. Brave little people with sharpened sticks, bringing down animals much bigger than themselves, dragging the kill back to a fire. It is a good story. It is also mostly backwards, at least at the beginning. Because for the first couple of million years, we were not the ones making the kill. We were the ones showing up afterward. And I do not mean that as an insult. I mean it as the single most important fact in the entire history of our species. Here is what the archaeology actually shows. When you kill an animal with a stone tool, you leave marks. Cutting meat off a bone with a sharp edge leaves cut marks, little slices in the surface. Smashing a bone open with a rock leaves a different kind of damage entirely, called percussion marks. Together, they are called butchery marks, and once you know what they look like, you can read them off a fossil 2 million years later. Researchers started recognizing these in the 1980s, and what they found at the oldest sites is not the story anyone expected. At Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, at a site called FLK Zinjanthropus, the bones our ancestors handled were mostly bones that had already been stripped. The meat was gone before we touched them. Something with much bigger teeth had eaten first, and what our ancestors were working on was the leftovers. You can actually see the order of operations in the damage. Tooth marks from a carnivore, and then, on top of those, percussion marks from a rock. We came second, the bone tells you. Now here is the part that turns this from a sad story into an extraordinary one. Bone marrow is not a consolation prize. It is the best food on the savanna. Marrow is fat, dense, concentrated fat, packed inside a sealed tube. Gram for gram it carries far more energy than lean muscle. And in a world where calories are a constraint on everything, where your brain is an expensive organ demanding fuel every second of every day, fat is not a snack. Fat is the whole game. And it is sitting inside a container that almost nothing in Africa can open. Think about the bone for a second. It is not just structure. From the perspective of every other animal out there, it is a locked box. Hyenas have some of the most powerful jaws on the planet, and they can crack many bones, which is genuinely impressive. But the big limb bones, the heavy ones with the most marrow, are engineered by evolution to survive enormous force. That is their job. They hold up an animal. Teeth apply force with a jaw. A jaw has limits. Muscle has limits. A rock swung by an arm does not have those limits, because you can pick a heavier rock. That is it. That is the trick. That is the entire competitive advantage of early humans, and it is not strength, and it is not speed, and it is not teeth. It is that we could go get a different tool when the first one was not good enough. And then it gets better because of the skull. At a site in Kenya called Kandjara South, researchers found something that says a lot about how these people thought. Early humans, they were not just being open limb bones. They were transporting heads, carrying skulls back to a spot, and breaking them open and eating the brains. Brain tissue is extraordinarily rich. It is fat, and it is nutrients, and it is exactly what a growing brain wants. And it sits inside the single most protected container an animal has. The largest carnivores in Africa could not exploit that resource. That is not a guess. That is what the researchers concluded. The lion cannot get into a skull. The hyena, with jaws that can crush a giraffe femur, cannot reliably get into a skull. A creature with no claws, no fangs, and no strength walked up to a picked-over carcass that 4 different predators had already given up on, and extracted the 2 most valuable substances on the entire animal. Because it brought a rock. There is a name for this in the literature. Blumenskine, the researcher who did much of the foundational work on this, called it a scavenging niche, a gap in the ecosystem that nobody else was filling. And what I find beautiful about it is how unglamorous it is. This is not the story of a mighty hunter. This is the story of something small, weak, and slow, noticing that everybody else was leaving the best part behind and quietly building an entire lineage on it. Now, it was not always this passive. There is a version of this that researchers call confrontational scavenging, and it is exactly what it sounds like. You do not always wait for the lion to finish. Sometimes you and everyone you know walk toward the lion together, shouting, throwing rocks, and take the carcass while there is still meat on it. That is an insane thing for a 60-kilo animal with no natural weapons to do, and it only works for one reason. There are a lot of you, and you are all doing it at the same time. Some researchers have argued that this is where the deep cooperation comes from. That standing shoulder to shoulder and walking at a predator and having it work is the kind of thing that builds a species. You cannot do it alone. You cannot do it without trusting the person next to you not to run. There is also a quieter version. Leopards store their kills in trees to keep them away from lions and hyenas, and a hominin could still climb, which the early ones could, has access to a food source sitting up in a tree with nothing guarding it. Low risk, high reward. Nobody else in the neighborhood can do both the climbing and the tool use. That is the pattern in all of it. We are not winning any of these fights. We are just doing something none of the fighters can do. Now let me take you forward to a cave near Tel Aviv and to the single strangest thing I found while researching this. The site is called Kesem Cave. It runs from roughly 400,000 to 200,000 years ago, and in 2019, a team published something in Science Advances that nobody was expecting. The people at Kesem were bringing back deer, but not whole deer. They were selective. They stripped the carcass out in the field, and they carried specific parts home: limb bones, skulls. Standard so far, but then the researchers looked at the bones more carefully. And what they found is that the bones had been kept, not eaten immediately, stored for weeks. Up to 9 weeks. Here is the clever part, and this is the bit that made me put my coffee down. They left the skin on. The dry skin over the bone acted as a lid. It sealed the marrow inside and slowed it going bad. So they would bring the bone in with its natural packaging still attached, stack it, and leave it. And weeks later, when they needed it, they would peel the skin off, crack the bone, and eat marrow that was still good. The researchers described it as prehistoric canned food, and as far as anyone knows, it is the earliest evidence of food preservation in the world. Sit with what that requires. That is not instinct. Instinct says eat it now. That is a group of people 400,000 years ago looking at food they could eat right this second and deciding not to because they understood that in 6 weeks they might need it more than they need it today. That is planning. That is a mental model of a future that does not exist yet. And the reason they had to invent it, according to the team, is a bit bleak. The elephants they used to rely on were disappearing from the region. The easy calories were going away. So they got clever because the alternative was not getting clever. So what was it actually like, eating this way? Raw, that is the first thing. Cold, raw, and tough. Meat that has not been cooked is chewy in a way that is hard to imagine if you have never tried it. Your jaw does a lot of work. Your teeth wear down. You can see it on the fossils. And it was not only animal. This part gets left out constantly because it is less exciting. Roots, tubers, fruit when it existed, which was not often and not for long. Seeds, insects, which are genuinely excellent food and which humans have eaten everywhere always and still do in most of the world. The image of the pure meat-eating ancestor is a modern invention. Most days there was no carcass. Most days you dug. And then there is the question everybody asks, which is why did they not get sick? The honest answer is that they did. Sometimes, eating something that 4 other species have already been standing on in the sun for most of a day is not safe. Parasites were real. Bacteria were real. But 2 things were on their side. They were eating it fresh from inside a sealed bone, which is a much cleaner environment than the outside of a carcass. And bodies adapted to it in ways ours are not, including stomach acids strong enough to handle things that would put you in hospital. They also just died more. That is the part nobody wants in the story. Some of them ate the wrong thing and did not come back from it, and the ones who could handle it had children. So here is where this lands. Every story we tell about becoming human is a story about winning, the hunt, the spear, the kill. The truth is that we became human by losing, over and over, to everything with teeth, and then walking up afterward and taking the part they could not reach. Marrow and brain, the 2 richest substances on the animal, locked inside the 2 hardest containers on the animal, available to exactly 1 creature on the continent, and only because that creature was the only one that thought to pick something up. That fat built something. Every time one of them cracked a femur and ate what was inside, they were feeding an organ that was getting bigger and more expensive every generation. The brain that let you find the carcass and open the bone and remember where the last one was itself being paid for by what was inside the bone. The tool fed the brain made better tools, and that loop ran for 2 million years before anybody lit a fire. You are not descended from the strongest thing in the grass. You are descended from the thing that came last, waited for everyone else to leave, and knew where the good part was. See you in the next one.